Time to have a look at some of the funniest episodes from Season 2. Let's begin with Trouble in Trolla. The episode begins when Driel returns to tell Orko that his uncle Montork is no longer the head of the Academy of Magic because he was beaten in a test of magic by a younger Trolla named Snoob. Orko can't believe his uncle could have lost and goes to Trolla to help him. Once again, Orko travels through his magic pyramid while He-Man has to use a magic portal. Orko and Driel want to talk to Snoob about the contest, but he tells them to go away. Orko and Driel then sneak into Snoob's house and catch him giving magic lessons to Whiplash. Whiplash's pig minions catch Orko and Driel and take them away. Montork's pet, Gark, sees them and goes back to Montork to tell what happened. He-Man shows up and he and Montork go after Orko and Driel. While Orko and Driel are captured, Whiplash admits that it was he who helped Snoob win the magic contest, though Snoob thought he won fair and square. Realizing that he's done the wrong thing, Snoob tries to use his magic against Whiplash but becomes a prisoner himself. Meanwhile, He-Man and Montork break into Whiplash's fortress while Orko and the others escape. Whiplash tries to stop the heroes with a giant monster and it almost defeats Orko and Snoob, but they're saved by Montork and their combined magic shrink the monster. Whiplash is defeated with Driel putting the miniature monster in his boot and He-Man trapping him in a chest. Snoob and the others make up and sit down for some gooble.
What about Whiplash?
Oh, he'll keep. Bring on the feast, Montork.
This episode is really the combination of all the best elements of the Trollin episodes from last season. We have Driel and Montork appearing together for the first time, we see a bit more of the Trollin society with the Crimson Council, and even Gark makes his return after his debut in Orko's favorite uncle. The episode just has a lot of goofy detail and excellent animation quality. Orko and the other Trollins are obviously given a lot of detail, but so are Whiplash's pig guards. The episode also has some priceless moments like Orko's magic trick from the start.
Adam, are you still in there?
I find it kind of funny that Whiplash's motivation for this episode is that he wants magic lessons from Snoob so he can impress Skeletor. However, he does feel like a fitting choice of a villain for this episode, though once again I have to admit that he was perhaps a little overused at the beginning of Season 2. Overall, this is one of the must-see episodes of the season just for all the great Trollin action. There are other episodes in Season 2 which feature Trollins, but I don't think any of them really rise to the same level as this one. Then we have the greatest show on Eternia. This episode carries the rather dubious honor of being considered the worst episode of the series, which I don't think is true at all. This episode is just incredibly hilarious and has to do with a circus arriving on Eternia. Orko is of course really excited and becomes obsessed with the idea of joining the circus. Crackers the Clown decides to let Orko have a taste of what living and working in the circus is really like, and soon Orko begins to learn that there is a whole lot more to it than performing for the crowds. The actual plot kicks off when Skeletor gets pissed about the fact that Crackers' circus turned down an invitation to perform for him. You heard that right, Skeletor got pissed because the circus wouldn't perform for him. So of course, Skeletor kidnaps Crackers and intends to close the circus to the public so that they will only perform for him. He sends Crackers to a canyon in Echo Valley where any loud noises will cause a rock slide. He-Man goes to rescue him and Crackers' weird little mechanical bird nearly kills them, but they make it out alright. He-Man then confronts Skeletor at the circus tent and He-Man chases him across the trapeze and the tight ropes. Finally, Skeletor makes the stupid choice of hiding in this fireworks storeroom and is blown away. Afterwards, the circus can perform for the people, and Orko's gotten fed up with wanting to join the circus. This episode is very tongue-in-cheek, which should be evident from the fact that some of the central characters in this episode are a clown, a three-trunked elephant, or a Myrtlefant, called Myrtle. This episode once again features a lot of great gags with Orko. Really, if the episode is ever about Orko, it's almost guaranteed to be funny. The reason most fans seem to dislike this episode is because it was written by a screenwriter who really had no experience on He-Man, and as a result treated the characters more cartoony than usual, especially Skeletor. And I do have to admit that his character motivation this time around is a little underwhelming. Not Conquest of Eternia or Grayskull, but just a big top. However, as I've stated before, I don't have a problem with He-Man episodes being comical, and in fact, a lot of the times, the funny episodes are some of my favorites. This episode may be just a tad too self-consciously campy, but it was obviously directed at little kids, who of course would have dreamed about running away with the circus. Orko is definitely just a child allegory in this episode, and the whole point of it was to show kids, just because you want something doesn't mean you'll get there easily. I really don't mind because the gags are good and the animation quality is so high. If anything, this episode has to be seen. So now for Orkos Return, an episode with a slightly misleading title, because this is really Trapjaw and Beastman's solo episode. Trapjaw and Beastman create a fortress in the forest with some seeds and a magic amulet. Meanwhile, Orko disappears while doing a magic trick, and it turns out Trapjaw and Beastman have captured him. Trapjaw and Beastman demand all the Photanium from the kingdom in exchange for Orko's freedom. Duncan and Adam go out to look for Orko, but the bad guys defend their fortress with energy bolts. The heroes go to the sorceress, who recognizes the amulet as the Amber Crystal of Melarka, which the bad guys have stolen from the Polti, an insect race. With no choice, Duncan and Adam head off to ask the Poltis for help. Meanwhile, Trapjaw and Beastman try to make Orko do their bidding, but he sabotages all their requests by doing everything too literally. Finally, Orko manages to trap Trapjaw and Beastman inside the magic cube which they were originally holding him in, but Beastman accidentally uses the amulet and also traps Orko with them. He-Man and Duncan make it to the Polti, but their queen doesn't trust outsiders because Trapjaw and Beastman stole the amulet, so they have to leave. However, He-Man and Duncan see a Polti and its slug thingy trapped on a cliff and stop to help. This first angers the Poltis, but their heroism convinces the Queen to give them the nullifier to stop the Amber Crystal. They use the nullifier and break in. He-Man destroys the amulet with Trapjaw and Beastman both glad just to get away from Orko. Now, I really like this episode, namely because it features Trapjaw and Beastman going solo for once. These two are my favorites among Skeletor's henchmen, and I always like seeing them together. I like it even more that in this episode they decide to ditch Skeletor to try and beat the good guys by themselves. Both of them have gone solo by themselves in the past, but never together. I also find it hilarious how everything they try to make Orko do backfires on them, to the point where they more or less leave at the end without a fight.
Okay, He-Man. How long can you hold him?
What?
Oh, just give me 10 minutes. That'll be enough time for me to get across the tar swamp, zip through the Forgotten Forest, and cross over the Mystic Mountains and be safe at home.
This is just a brilliant episode altogether. Although I've never been a fan of insect characters in He-Man, the Polti are pretty bearable, and on top of that, this episode has some really great animation moments. It's worth seeing for the villain team-up, and of course for all the Orko-related action, but it's also a solid episode in its own right. Well, finally, let's look at one of the most ludicrous plans Skeletor has ever had to capture Grayskull. He's resurrected ancient monsters, tried to ram a comet into the castle, taken it to another dimension, tried to destroy it by going into the past, but now it's time for his most devious plot yet. Making mini Skeletors. What the hell?
For your listening displeasure, a little concert. We call it the Sonic Sound Trap.
Here, There, Skeletors Everywhere is an episode that is just as absurd as it sounds. Skeletor steals Duncan's duplicate machine, which makes copies of any object, but only half the size. Skeletor uses it to make a bunch of mini Skeletors called Skeletoids, and tries to overrun the kingdom. Describing it really doesn't do it justice. You just really have to watch the episode for yourself. The only other noteworthy thing about the episode are the bears, a family called Joe, Vegeta, and Jane, who depend on a rock called
Bite!
which allows them to turn invisible and remain safe against the animals of the wilderness.
Bite!
Plays a big role in the episode when He-Man and Jova sneak away from the palace using.
Bite!
And of course at the end, He-Man makes little duplicates of himself and reveals that Skeletor was hoarding a bunch of
Bite!
at Snake Mountain. This episode also features cameos from Mossman, Cyclone, and Mechanic, although for some reason Mechanic sounds completely different from his other episode appearances.
No way out here either.
This episode is just full of weird shit, like another appearance by the Roton,
Nice going, Whiplash.
and the Bear family in need of
Bite!
also sticks out because they don't even look like He-Man characters, but in fact look like they've escaped from a different cartoon show altogether. This is a pretty cute and hilarious episode worth a watch. Well, next time we'll be wrapping up the Season 2 reviews with the very final episode of the original He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. Until then, I have the power, so can you.